Welcome back to Rockers Beer Review. Today we're reviewing the new album from Steven Wilson titled The Overview. Now, I'm sure I said this on the review of my previous Steven Wilson's album, The Harmony Codex, but there's always an exciting anticipation with the launch of every one of his albums, mainly because you never really know what you're going to get. However, although there was no teasing of tracks with this album, there are of course only 2 tracks on the album, which total 42 minutes. We did know from the outset, obviously because of the 2 times 20 minute songs, or suites we should maybe call them, that this was going to be Steven going a lot more prog on this album, in a way that we hadn't really seen since maybe 2015's Hand Cannot Erase. But how prog is The Overview? Well, I mean, really it's about the concept, isn't it? What is the concept of progressive music generally? For me, progressive music means that it doesn't stay the same. It's always evolving. It's always changing, I suppose. It's not just about having songs that are 20 minutes long. So for this album, though, for those that you got this far, a couple of minutes in, and like short reviews or have a very short attention span, you know who you are. Then the question is this a good album? And can it be easily answered? Well, yeah, it's a definite yes from me. I think it is a very good album. It has echoes of all his previous solo albums, and to some extent, a lot from his output with Porcupine Tree. I wouldn't say it's a heavy guitar album, though. It's got lots of, it hasn't got lots of long solos, but there are all kinds of genres, from sort of rock and pop to more electronic and more sort of cinematic type of soundscapes, that really as a package doesn't really define one kind of sound. Now, I won't dwell too much on the overall concept of The Overview, except it's been inspired to some extent, and hence the space theme, by the feeling that astronauts have when they first see the planet Earth from space, and really the cognitive shift that's caused by viewing the Earth from this perspective. So this concept, Steven Wilson has actually said, it sort of was utilised really as a starting point for the sound of the record, which has been described by Steven Wilson as being similar to sort of acts like Pink Floyd, Tangerine Dream and Vangelis, but all in a sort of modern context really. What I'm going to do, for those that are still here wanting to hear more about the actual album itself, I'm going to break down the tracks into their sort of respective parts. I do like the fact that even on Spotify, you can listen to each song as a whole, so two songs, or you can actually listen to each individual part separately. I really like the way that they've done that. I know there's a lot of other bands that will have split one song into lots of little parts. So track 1, Objects Outlive Us, is the big one. It's 23 minutes and 19 seconds. And this is split into 6 different length parts. Then the title track itself is 18 minutes and 21 seconds. And this one is split into 4 parts. So let's go through the first track. Objects Outlive Us. The first part is called No Monkey's Paw. And this sort of is a 2-minute introduction. It starts with a Steven Wilson signature falsetto vocals with lots of sort of eerie, spacey sounds. And then it sort of segues into the Buddha of the modern age, the second track, where it gets more upbeat. And again, surprisingly for a sort of big prog song, there's a lot more vocals than I was expecting. And I think this is a good thing. Now, Steven on this track sings with a sort of, it's almost like a counterpoint style, with the track slowly building with a piano. It sounds a little like a mid-period Genesis. Think of, say, something that you might have heard of, Trick of the Tail, or even Wind and Wuthering. The third track then, Objects Meanwhile, is probably the standout track of the whole suite of this song. It's the real meat and potatoes really of the whole suite. It's quite lyrically heavy with that sort of small town England style. I think this part was actually written by XTC's Andy Partridge, because I know that he writes lyrics on the album. But it's a little bit more musical and, dare I say, rocky than what we're hearing beforehand. There's a strong sort of synth bass and a strong guitar riff, but still plenty of little electronic bells and whistles. Overall, this this track is 6 minutes 31 of the overall suite. It reminds me a little bit of the standout track from the Porcupine Tree album, The Incident, the song Time Flies. It's got a lot of similarities with that. The next two parts of this song add a bit more prog, especially with the sort of instrumental progressiveness of Cosmic Sons of Toil, which reminds me of the kind of sort of high intensity prog workout in songs from Hand Cannot Erase, Ancestral from Hand Cannot Erase. There's a similarity there with these songs. And then the closing part of the track is a real highlight. It introduced themes of the first part, again with that falsetto vocal by Stephen Wilson, before it goes into an extended guitar solo from the guitarist on this album, Randy McShine. It's a melodic solo. It has echoes of stuff like Comfortably Numb, but it's not like that. There's a lot of sustain on this on this solo. It's not quite up there with the sort of technical wizardry that we've seen in the past from the likes of Guthrie Govan, but it plays a part within the ending of the whole suite, and it puts it on a real high point. So that's the first track. The second track, the final track, in my opinion though, is not quite as good, certainly not as immediate as the first one. For this track, there seems to be a lot more experimental, electronic, and sort of more cinematic themes. It starts fairly slowly with the track Perspective. It's a spacey, electronic, heavy sound with lots more sort of drum machine than real drums. There's a female vocal narrative, which is actually from Stephen's wife, and it sort of basically just describes the planets and galaxy sizes and stuff like that. Then it goes into a beautiful Infinity, a much more traditional sort of Stephen Wilson pop song with a sort of strong, I think, a strong Beatles vibe. But there's a nice guitar sound, and it could be a song from, To the Bone. It is that sort of style. Infinity, measured in moments, then returns to that sort of space-like theme from the first part of this song, and again Stephen's wife narration, but this time we've got Stephen coming in and singing across it as well, and there's proper drums in this song. There's also a kind of hybrid guitar sax solo. It certainly sounds like a saxophone, but it could almost be played on a guitar. And for me, this is Stephen Wilson at his most Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. The final part of the track then breaks down into a slower, atmospheric sort of track, this time with a more pronounced, dreamy sort of saxophone solo throughout, before it slowly ends without too much fanfare, really. And that pretty much is it. 42 minutes odd has flown by before you know it. I think the second track itself is closest in style to maybe the title track on the Harmony Codex. It could almost be an extended version of it. It all sounds a little bit overly familiar, whether it is because of Rota, and that's Stephen's wife, her narration running through it as was on the Harmony Codex, or the sort of spacey atmospheric themes. I still think it's the weaker of these two tracks, but I think it's probably be one that's a bit more of a grower. So that's it. Yeah, it is prog, but even though it's 42 minutes in length, it still leaves me wanting more. Where does it really fit though within Stephen Wilson's solo albums? It's quite difficult to predict in terms of, the quality of it. It doesn't really have the gravitas of songs of albums like Hand Cannot Erase, or even The Raven Refused to Sing, and the catchy pop sensibilities, I don't think are quite there as much as they are in To the Bone or the Harmony Codex. But in the next video that I probably do, next music video I do for the channel, is probably going to be the ranking of his album. So I'm thinking about where I'm going to place this, but stay tuned for that. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe so you'll get notified of when I do that ranking video. But let me know what you think of this album and how would you rank it against his back catalogue. Drop me a comment and let me know what you think. And until the next video, well, I say in all of my videos, but you know what you got to do. Keep on rocking.